Hello, my name's Heather Powell and I'm head of the property and construction team here at Blick Rothenberg. I'm delighted to be joined today by Adigun, a director in our VAT team who's a real expert on property VAT. We want to talk today about the changes that can occur with VAT when plans change and how that can impact on property developers in particular. We've got some big changes coming up. Our new government has announced that they want 1.5 million new homes to be built in the next 5 years. They're going to employ 300 new planning officers, that they're going to release grey land for development. This creates a lot of opportunities, but it also means plans can change quite dramatically. So Ola, we've had a couple of instances recently where you've had to step in and help our clients to mitigate these penalties that can arise. So one, I think, was a commercial investment where our client had plans to develop out, had an amazing offer to exit. But what were the VAT issues?
Yes, Heather. I think the first thing that businesses have to think about is how much VAT have they actually incurred to date, and what was the basis of them incurring that VAT. Now, if they were intending to, they have a commercial property which they are seeking planning permission to convert to residential, and maybe to sell the freehold or to grant a long lease in excess of 21 years, potentially that is what we call a zero rated supply, which should give them entitlement to recover the VAT. However, should their plans change and maybe during the process of seeking planning permission, they receive an offer, say for example, from a different party, and that different party may want to go on and complete that project. So if the development is at a stage where they haven't actually got planning permission or carried out the conversions, they have to consider, should they sell the land or the property, in this case, the commercial property, should they sell the commercial property, what would be the treatment of that transaction? Now, normally, the sale of a commercial property is exempt from VAT. Now, what that means is that the exempt supplier does not give an entitlement to VAT recovery.
Exactly, and they'd spent over £1 million trying to get planning, sorting out what they were going to do.
No, absolutely. So they're potentially facing a clawback of the VAT that they originally recovered on the basis of their original plans.
Exactly.
So it's something that they have to sit back and think about before they get to the heads of term stage. And one of the potential solutions at this stage would be for them to consider to opt to tax the property. Now, opting to tax the property, as I said previously, that the sale of a commercial property is normally exempt from VAT. The effect of opting to tax is that VAT then becomes chargeable on that sale. Now, if the purchaser is going to continue with that development and also carry on, maybe sell the freehold or grant the long lease, then potentially, should VAT become chargeable, then the purchaser should be entitled to recover it. It's kind of a VAT neutral position in that case. However, if the developer misses that point, then it's stuck with VAT that it's initially recovered on the basis that it was going to carry out the development itself.
Exactly, and it was a massive cost, and even if when they're negotiating with the buyer, as you say, before heads of terms, they can actually share the burden. If the buyer says, I refuse to buy it, or I don't want you to opt to tax because of the way they want to use the property or use the land going forward. But you want to know when you're negotiating the price, don't you? And of course, for our client, your team arranged for the option to tax because that worked for both sides, and it was a fairly easy process, wasn't it?
It's a straightforward process once both parties agree that is the way forward. And you're right to point out that some purchasers may resist or object to an option to tax, and as you rightly pointed out, Heather, it's a matter of negotiating on the price, and the parties can come to agreement without opting to tax. But it's just an awareness that it's not just a straightforward you sell and bail out. There are some VAT implications which could mean that you have to pay back money to HMRC.
Yes, yeah. And the other thing that I've seen coming up recently is where developers have built a block of flats and maybe they haven't been able to sell them. And that was always their intention. They were going to sell long leases, well over 21 years, 199-year leases. And in fact, they found they can't get the market. Mortgage rates have gone up. There aren't the buyers out there. People are a bit scared of flats at the moment as well. So they're renting them out. They may be for 6 months, see what happens with interest rates, see whether they can sell in 2025. There are VAT implications for that as well, aren't there?
There certainly are, Heather. Obviously, their original intention is to grant the taxable leases, which gives them the entitlement to VAT recovery. But before they can fulfil that, they've decided to let them out on a short-term basis. Now, short-term lets are generally exempt from VAT, so there is potentially a restriction to the VAT that they may have incurred in carrying out the development. However, it's important for them to, if they still intend after the short-term lets to actually make the sale or the grant of the major interest, if they intend to do that, then they should document it somewhere. The VAT that they may have to pay back to HMRC that they have previously recovered can be calculated on a kind of a pro rata basis so that they don't lose the input tax because they still have the intention to make the zero-rated supply. Exactly,
and if they talk to us when they're making that decision to let, when they're assessing whether they need to let, whether that's the right commercial decision for them, which often is the case, just get some money in, then we can advise them on the elections they need to make, the notifications, the actual VAT that they will need to pay over, but also make sure that they've got all the documentation in place to show to HMRC and illustrate why what is hopefully quite a small element of the VAT they've recovered is repayable, rather than a number that HMRC may dream up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, documentation is very important, and it's also important for the developer or to be consistent as well. So once they make that decision, so for example, they may decide that they don't want to grant that long lease any longer, and they are comfortable with the just having short-term tenancies. But obviously the implications there is that they will lose any VAT
on the professional fees, on any planning fees, anything that they've actually paid.
Yes, and that's a commercial decision.
Exactly.
But if the commercial decision is this is just going to be temporary, as you said, it's a calculation. There's a calculation to be made, which it could mean that they still have to pay back a small proportion of the VAT that they have previously recovered.
We've illustrated 2 points here where VAT issues can arise. The one thing I've learned over the last 30 years, Ola, is that VAT is really complicated. It's not my expert area. We do have experts here in the firm. So a call to all clients, anyone listening here, if you are changing your plans in terms of a development, some land you've got, consult your advisors, ask whether there are any VAT implications, because 20% is a big number, and understand the implications and whether there are some solutions before you go to heads of terms with a potential buyer, before you agree the final price. Thank you very much for listening, and please do reach out to either me or to Ola if you have any questions. Thank you very much.